Good afternoon. This is Dimitri Lascaris coming to you from Montreal, Canada on August 1st, 2024. I just returned from 5 or 6 days in Venezuela after having been requested by the United Socialist Party of the country to come and act as an election observer. While I was in transit from Caracas to Montreal, the most extraordinary events unfolded in West Asia. Over the past 48 hours, Israel and the United States have engaged in major escalations of their wars in the region. First, 2 days ago, an Israeli airstrike in Beirut killed Hezbollah's top military commander, Fouad Shukur. That strike also reportedly killed 3 women and 2 children. The death toll of the strike could climb as it demolished an entire civilian building, and others could still be buried under the rubble. Israel has admitted to being behind the assassination in Beirut. Then, on that same day, a U.S. airstrike on Iraq's Popular Mobilization Forces killed 4 of its members. Iraq's military quickly accused the U.S. of committing a, quote, heinous crime, close quote, by targeting Iraqi security forces. And yes, these were forces of the Iraqi government. The U.S. admitted to that strike, claiming that it was acting in self-defense. Then came what is perhaps the most provocative strike of all. A blast killed Ismail Haniyeh, the leader of the political wing of Hamas, in Tehran, the capital of Iran. Haniyeh was in Iran to attend the inauguration of its new president, Masoud Pezeshkian. These 3 attacks followed an apparent Israeli airstrike on Yemen on July 20th. So far, no one has claimed responsibility for the strike in Tehran this week, but the Times of Israel reported yesterday that Israeli ministers were celebrating Haniyeh's killing. It's also reported that Israel's government press office, which operates under the auspices of Netanyahu, briefly posted an image of Haniyeh with the word eliminated stamped across his forehead. The post, according to the Times of Israel, was later deleted. Citing Iranian sources, the New York Times just reported that Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, has ordered a direct strike on Israel in retaliation for the killing of Haniyeh. What does all of this mean? What is likely to happen next? Is the world's most important oil-producing region and the site of so much Western-backed suffering about to be consumed by the most devastating war in its history? Now here to discuss these questions with me is Ghadi Francis. Ghadi is a war correspondent based in Lebanon. She has been to conflict zones throughout West Asia, including Syria, Gaza, Yemen, Iraq, and South Lebanon, and she has a large following on X where you can follow her. There she goes by the handle of @Ghadi, Ghidi Francis, Francis. Ghadi, thank you so much for joining me again on my program, and I'm happy to know that you're safe despite all that's happening in Lebanon and the broader region.
Thank you for having me again, Dimitri. This is our destiny, just like we previously conversed in your show. It's either we stay alive or dead here. We have no other choice. This is our land. We don't leave.
And in that regard, Ghadi, what is the mood today in Lebanon, as best as you can ascertain the mood given everything that's going on?
Lebanon is a very different and peculiar situation. I mean, if you go to the Google now, or if you check the social media feeds, you can find Lebanese people partying all over Beirut. You can find fully booked restaurants and nightclubs and lounges and beach clubs all across Lebanon. And also you can find an ongoing war for the 9th month. Lebanon is a very complex country where war is nothing new to us. We have been immune to war because generational, ancestral, it is always like that. So we find our way to be resilient throughout this war. You can find that, yes, Israel has attacked the southern suburb of Beirut 2 days ago. But yes, life is going on. That doesn't mean that we do not acknowledge each other's struggles, but it also means that somehow the Lebanese have normalized this situation. It is not new to us. These strikes are not new. The Israeli aggressions are not new. The level of danger is not new, but we have been used to this lifestyle. And also, we really trust our resistance. We really trust our ability to deter the danger. And And this has also been built by the credibility that has been built throughout the years and throughout this most recent war round. Every time we are attacked, we retaliate, and every time the retaliation is really calculated very well in order to be as diplomatically played as possible to deter and to also not jeopardize the situation of Lebanon. So when you listen to the news now, you might think we are worse than we actually are, because right now our airport is still functioning. Hundreds and thousands of Lebanese from the diaspora are still flocking to their country to see their loved ones. And our life is still going on, and we will remain here just as normally as possible.
So when you mentioned the resistance, today was a moment of significant importance in terms of its communication with the public about its intentions. And Hezbollah Secretary General Hassan Nasrallah delivered a speech by video at the funeral of the Hezbollah military commander, the top commander, Fouad Shukur. And among other things, Sayed Nasrallah said that the war with Israel's genocidal regime had reached a, quote, new phase. What did you make of Sayed Nasrallah's speech today? Were there any surprises? What do you think we should take away from it?
First of all, we should always acknowledge that Hezbollah leaders and Hamas leaders and resistance leaders in general always end up as martyrs. They always end up assassinated. It is not new. It is not unprecedented for Hezbollah to have a leader assassinated. Ahmad Moghni was assassinated. Mustafa Badruddin was assassinated. Hassan La'is was assassinated. And also Fouad Shukr was assassinated. But that doesn't mean that this is uncalculated. These are people who have been living this, and this is a threat that they've calculated for themselves for decades. We're speaking about people who have been wanted for decades. Whether it's Ismail Haniyeh, they tried to assassinate him many times previously. So the resistance groups, they don't really have a surprise when these things happen. But of course, it turns new measures, and it really introduces new measures into the war. What Sayyid Nasrallah said today was not of a surprise to me. We know very well that they will reply. I was really happy by the way he delivered the threat. He did not limit it to a time, but he really said that we will reply. You can stay waiting. You can remain waiting and anxious. And this is also, Dimitri, this is a very big part of the war. The psychological warfare is a very big part of the war. And as you can see, the instability in Israel is also one of the wins when the resistance is speaking about the wins. The Lebanese resistance, Hezbollah, does not really count civilian lives, does not really intend to kill civilians. So for Hezbollah, when hundreds of thousands of settlers have fled the areas, or when the military headquarters and the intelligence headquarters have been evacuated, this is a win. Or when they have a drone flying over Haifa, locating areas where they could strike without being stopped, or without anybody like capturing their drone, this is also a win. So the warfare here is not counted by how many lives are lost. It is counted by the actual deterrence. There's nothing that's stopping the Israelis from actually carpet bombing our whole city, our whole capital. But one thing, our ability to do the same, to reciprocate just exactly the same. So I think Nasrallah's speech today was very brilliantly put when he said one very important piece of information that anybody who's trying to analyze the Middle East should take into consideration. We are in the era of a different kind of resistance. We are in the era of something called the axis of the resistance. In the 80s, in the 90s, in the 70s, in the 60s, in the Intifada, those people were stranded. Those groups were stranded. They were either fighting Palestinian resistance or Lebanese resistance, or some of the rebels here, left, right, or center. Today, there is an axis. There is Al-Hashd al-Sha'bi in Iraq. There is Al-Houthi Ansarullah in Yemen. There is Hezbollah, there are groups in Syria, there are groups in Palestine, and there's Hamas and Al-Jihad and Al-Jabha. So when you actually hit Iran, Iraq, Yemen, and Lebanon, and also Syria constantly for months, you don't know who's going to hit back. Sayyid Nasrallah really said that it's not going to be one part of the axis. It might be more than one. It might be from the Iraqis or the Yemenis or the Lebanese or all together, and the Palestinians. It might be from East Palestine, from South Palestine. So this open-ended situation is also a very big point of strength. If the Israelis think by killing the negotiator like Ismail Haniyeh, or by killing someone inside like in an intel operation like Fuad Shukr, if they think they really jeopardize the resistance organizations, then they have done no homework in the past decades. We are talking, I mean, Ismail Haniyeh has been assassinated. Look at all his predecessors. Who hasn't? Al-Rantisi was assassinated.
Yeah,
Everybody was assassinated,
and on that point, Ghadi, when I was last in Lebanon, I visited the shrine of Abbas al-Musawi, the first Secretary General of Hezbollah in southern Lebanon, who I'm sure you know was assassinated by an Israeli Hellfire missile fired from a helicopter in the early 1990s, along with his wife and his son. And who was his replacement? His replacement was Hassan Nasrallah. And any rational, sane observer would grasp immediately that Hezbollah is much stronger today. This is no disrespect intended to Abbas al-Musawi, but it's much stronger and formidable today than it was under al-Musawi. So, and I watched an interview yesterday of Israeli journalist Gideon Levy, who said he can't think of a single instance, nor can I, in which Israel's barbaric policy of assassinating leaders of the resistance has actually been effective. I would imagine you agree with that assessment. And if you do, why do you think they continue to do it nonetheless? What are they trying to achieve?
I do agree with that assessment. Any sane person would agree with that assessment. These kinds of organizations and ideologies only become stronger with more anger and more revenge and vengeance, Why do they do that? I think the Netanyahu is really looking hard for any kind of tactical win. And given that he's just arrived from the United States, where he has been revamped and energized by the standing ovation from the AIPAC.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but just to clarify, it was 58 standing ovations. I actually was counting them, and I gave up at 30. And that was in the first 25 minutes. But sorry to interrupt you. Please go ahead.
So after this whole theatrical thing of revamping this baby killer that is already wanted by the highest international criminal court ever, all this after he's coming back and the situation inside his colony, I mean, the police are clashing with soldiers. The Knesset is discussing whether rape is legal or not. The situation on the ground, it's only very logical for him to try to look for strategical wins. And probably he has a green light from the Americans, like do as much as you can for the time being before a new administration is put in. Maybe the American non-governance that is the situation right now is also a window for him to play these kind of theatricals to maybe push some new statical in the politics inside Israel, or whether it's with these negotiations and so on. But the problem is they're still not really looking realistically at this battle. After you kill tens of thousands of people, after you deliberately assassinate journalists, doctors, you bomb hospitals, you starve the people, and you actually continue to bomb 4 countries simultaneously in this region, there's no coming back from here. He's not going to be able to climb down that tree, no matter what he does, no matter who he kills. It's not going to be able to silence the Israelis or the families of the hostages. It's not going to be able to get his hostages back. This is not going to get him anywhere. And it's not going to be a strategical win. Maybe it's a tactical win. Okay, I killed an enemy. But on the long run, he just exacerbated his situation because he just made all of the resistance axis angrier, and he's made it directly with Iran now. Maybe he's trying to widen the war, because dragging Iran into the war would drag the United States further, and now his political career would be like revamped for some more time. He would gain more time. But even if that happens, it's not really gonna serve him or his colony. Israel has started its self-destruction path, not today, not in Sheikh Jarrah and Saif al-Quds in 2021, not in every round of war. Israel started its self-destruction path since the first time they stopped caring about their image. And I think it was somewhere before the 2010 when they started killing people, and videos started emerging, because before the era of the social media and the smartphones, all these things were happening, but we weren't reporting them, and we weren't really tossing them around on social media and so on. So Israel has started this self-destruction path. These people that have been brought from all over the world are not really comfortable in colonizing us anymore, because our people, after decades and decades, have nothing to lose anymore, after losing many family members, and all of this blood has been shed here. So I think no matter what he does, it's not going to change his situation. It's only going to exacerbate it.
According to Israeli officials, Ghadi, Fuad Shukur's assassination was retaliation for the killing of, I believe it was 12 children in Majd al-Shams, a town situated in the Golan Heights. And Israel claims that a Hezbollah rocket attack killed those children. Now, under international law, the Golan Heights belong not to Israel, but to Syria. And for those who question whether that's the case, I refer you to your UN Security Council Resolution 497, which states, and I quote, Israel's decision to impose its laws, jurisdiction, and administration in the occupied Syrian Golan Heights is null and void and without international legal effect. Even Canada, which has a government that is slavishly deferential to Israel, concurs with this assessment. On the website of Global Affairs Canada, the government states, quote, Canada does not recognize permanent Israeli control over territories occupied in 1967, the Golan Heights, the West Bank, East Jerusalem, and the Gaza Strip. So, Ghadi, what is your view of Israel's claim that Hezbollah targeted Majd al-Shams and that Israel killed Shukur in retaliation for the deaths of those children there?
First of all, these people do not identify as Israelis. They are occupied people. They identify as Syrians. Second of all, they kicked Netanyahu out, and all the ministers that tried to come to parade over the blood and to actually invest in the blood in Majd al-Shams, they were kicked out. The people were very clear on their stance in Majd al-Shams. In case the Israelis believe their claims, nobody else does. And coming to the credibility, I mean, who still believes Israeli claims? These are people who claim that there was a stampede when they bombed 400 people around a van, the Flower Massacre. Those are people who claim that babies on incubator in Al-Shifa hospital are Hamas. These are people that stood in the United Nations and said that the UNRWA that they bombed, the UNRWA, the only agency that is a lifeline for the millions of refugees of Palestinians, they said the UNRWA is Hamas. Are we really taking the Israeli claims? And even if so, the Golan Heights is an occupied Syrian land. And I want to go the extra mile and say, even if it was not Syrian, do they really like Arabs? I mean, we can see all the things that they talk about. We can see all their ministers. We can see all their municipality mayors, every single public figure, how they're speaking, how they really condescend and believe that Arabs are subhumans. So you want us to believe that they want to retaliate for the Arab kids, which their Iron Dome killed? First of all, this is just about the Israeli claims. Number two, yes, they killed Fuad Shukr to retaliate, but not for the kids of Majd al-Shams, because Fuad Shukr is the brain behind most of the work that has been emerging in the past months, because he's the one that has worked on the warfare technology for decades and decades in Hezbollah. This is why they wanted him dead, because he's been fighting them for decades and fighting them collectively in a very strong manner of developing new weapons and new missiles and new technologies. So this is their problem with Fuad Shukr. They don't care about Arab babies. They like to behead Arab babies. They are doing this in Gaza. They are doing this inside Palestine. They have been doing this for decades and decades. Nothing woke up in their conscience all of a sudden to be angry about Majd al-Shams kids. And if so, Hezbollah does not kill civilians. And if it happened, they would clearly say it. And I think there's one thing I have in common with the Israelis and the Israeli settlers is that we believe Hassan Nasrallah more than we believe Israeli claims.
And in fact, I've heard reports that even the Israelis feel that Sayed Nasrallah is more trustworthy than their major politicians. That's coming from.
Of course.
So
because he doesn't bluff. He hasn't been bluffing for all his life in public. Every time he's in a speech, every time he delivers a speech, he says something, a piece of information, or he announces a capacity or a plan. It's actually there. Whereas the Israelis, they never deliver what they talk about. So it's only logical.
So yesterday, Ghadi, there was an emergency meeting of the United Nations Security Council. I understand it was requested by China and Algeria, and it was on the last day of the current presidency, UN Security Council presidency of the Russian Federation, which was 1 month long and started on July 1st. Russia, not surprisingly, granted the request, also invited speakers, representatives of Syria and also of Iran to speak at the emergency session. And I want to play for you an excerpt from the speech of Robert Wood, one of the United Nations ambassadors of the United States to the UN Security Council. And I'm not going to play the whole thing. Just so you know, the part you're not going to listen to is a summary or recitation of UN Security Council resolutions, which Robert Wood claims Iran is violating. If you want to get all the details of those resolutions, you can find the complete emergency session on YouTube. I'll put a link to it in the description, but I'm going to play for you the part of Robert Wood's statement, which I think is most interesting. And please bear with me, it's a little bit long.
Iran must abide by the Council's resolutions. And failing that, the Security Council must consider additional measures to enforce its resolutions to hold Iran accountable and address repeated actions by its terrorist proxies and partners that threaten regional peace and security. Third, the United States was not aware of or involved in the apparent death of Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh. Indeed, we have no independent confirmation as to Hamas's claims regarding his death. Fourth, and as Secretary Blinken noted earlier today, it is best not to speculate on the impact that recent events may have on peace and security in the Middle East. A broader war is neither imminent nor inevitable, although the opportunistic attacks by Iran and its network of terrorist proxies and partners across the region have repeatedly brought us closer to a regional conflict. For our part, the United States will continue to lead the way in diplomatic efforts to end the war in Gaza and reduce regional tensions. We will continue to work hard to prevent a broader regional war. That starts, as Secretary Blinken reaffirmed today, with finalizing an agreement for an immediate ceasefire with the release of hostages in Gaza, as called for in Resolution 2735. A ceasefire agreement is the surest way to alleviate the suffering of the Palestinian people and unlock the possibility of broader stability. And so, the United States will continue to work in partnership with Egypt, Qatar, and other regional partners to seek to deliver an agreement. We have also made clear to all the parties that we want to avoid an escalation of fighting along the blue line between Israel and Lebanon. We remain committed to a diplomatic outcome to restore calm along the blue line that would allow citizens on both sides to safely return to their homes. Again, we believe that there is still time and space for a diplomatic solution.
Now, Ghadi, I have so much to say about this statement. I don't know where to begin. First of all, I want to start with this, I'm just going to be blunt, preposterous claim that the United States did not, I'm going to quote the exact words, the US was not aware of or involved in the apparent death of Ismail Haniyeh, the Hamas political leader who was assassinated in Tehran. Now, I have tremendous difficulty, Ghadi, believing that Israel would assassinate the leader of the political wing of Hamas in Tehran, particularly this particular time, without even telling the United States in advance that it was going to do this. What I find particularly interesting is that this rampage of death and destruction, which the United States and Israel have visited upon the leaders of resistance groups in West Asia in a period of 48 hours, happened only about a week, less than a week after Netanyahu returned from the United States. And there does appear to be coordination because, as I mentioned at the outset, the United States admitted that it attacked and killed members of the popular mobilization forces in Iraq at the same time as Israel was striking, with its own admission, the top commander of Hezbollah. Do you believe for one second that the United States was not aware of or involved in the decision of the Israeli regime? And I'm going to come to the whole question of whether the Israeli regime is actually behind that killing, because I think that's another issue we should discuss. But do you think it's remotely credible that the United States was not aware of or involved in the killing of Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran, prior to the time that it was actually committed, this crime?
Well, there is a chance because Netanyahu has been acting out, and there is a chance that he's trying to drag the Americans into a broader war. And there's a chance that even if they know, they don't want to say that they know, so that the situation doesn't really escalate, because they're trying to be the negotiators and to manage what kind of retaliation would come after that. So there is a chance, because Netanyahu is too crazy, he can do that. There is a chance, but even if there was a chance and they didn't know, when they speak about it, was really funny, that part where he said America will keep on working to prevent this war. I mean, aren't these American-made ammunitions, and aren't these American-made rockets that are still that killed Ismail Ghul yesterday, and our colleagues, the journalists and the civilians every day? If America wanted to stop the war, it would at least stop funding and arming the killer. This is bluffing, and we're sick of this. I mean, we're sick of the American lies here in this region. We're sick of them saying they care about democracy or human rights. I mean, it's too blunt and it's too obvious out there. 58 standing ovations for a war criminal, for God's sake. What are you doing here? You go and you imprison the doctors and the academics and the students that go and protest for Palestine. You obviously sympathize with Islamophobia, and you designate anybody who's anti-Zionism as anti-Semite. I mean, what is the American democracy all about in the course of all this war? Inside America and all across the world. We don't buy this. The Americans, the American Secretary of State, or whoever is talking, or whoever is saying that they're really working on not making this a regional war, we can just tell them one thing: there is no war in this region if it weren't for the United States of America. If it weren't for the American ammunitions and protections, Israel would have long been gone by now, because we are the people and it's our land. But you've been always helping them with your F-16s and your F-35s and your planes. So even if they didn't know about the Ismail Haniyeh part, which is very unlikely, as you previously said, they must have met in the air as they were striking different targets, and they must have high-fived like they've always done in all the wars on humanity that they have led in the Middle East.
And so this brings me to the question of who actually did this thing. So, when Ansarallah succeeded in striking Tel Aviv with a drone. I think it was about 10 days ago, 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
And Israel claimed within a matter of, I don't know, 24 hours to be behind an attack on a Yemeni port, which I understood. It was a very impressive explosion because they struck apparently a fuel depot. And I believe they killed some civilians, but they claimed to be behind that attack, and everybody was led to believe they were behind that attack. And it occurred to me, I mean, I don't know that anything actually turns on this, Ghadi. I mean, it may at the end of the day be insignificant, but it occurred to me as soon as I heard Israel boasting about having attacked Yemen successfully, as they put it, that this might all be a ruse, and that it might just be the Americans and the British launching another attack on Yemen and letting Israel take credit for it, because it would be much easier, given the military assets that the British and the Americans have in the Red Sea, and the fact that they've been striking Yemen with regularity over the past few weeks, for them to do it rather than Israel, which is quite far from Yemen. And so can we even say with a high level of confidence that it was Israel who killed Ismail Haniyeh? Isn't it possible that it was the United States, which has military bases and naval vessels that can fire sophisticated missiles into Tehran, which are much closer to Tehran than Israel is to Tehran? I mean, do we know if it was really, do we at the end of the day know with confidence that it was Israelis, not the Americans, who did this? And does it really matter at the end of the day? Because aren't they really just one and the same?
Well, they are one and the same in many ways, but we're always looking forward to the awareness and to the knowledge, to the American voices that are different, to the actual mobilization of this movement, pro-humanity and anti-killing, that is happening all across the world. I haven't lost hope on American people and changing the course of how their governance is affecting the world. But in general, if we want to say that the Americans actually carried on, or the West helped the Israelis in Yemen, it's possible, yes. And just like you stated, we can't really differentiate at that. I mean, we've seen images in Abu Ghraib when the Americans were in Iraq that had resurfaced now in Sidi Timan by the Israelis. The method, the dehumanization, the criminal acts during wars, this is just, they're reading from the same root, But now many different narratives are emerging about how Ismail Haniyeh was assassinated, and one of the scenarios is that a bomb was planted in his residence. Another is a rocket. A third one is like a missile from across the oceans. I don't really know, but I think even if they did it, they don't want to say they did it, which really says a lot about the ability of Iranians to strike fear without even lifting a finger, because they still didn't do anything.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the Israelis have always been intertwined with the American backup in this region. Even if they didn't actually do it, even if they didn't actually pull the trigger, the Americans, their presence, just like you said, their bases, their military capacity all across the Middle East is the reason why the Israelis can carry on this slaughter and not really care about anybody's opinion.
And I think, Ghadi, and this is really, I just want to close out on this observation. I'll invite you to comment before we end our discussion. It's so important, in my opinion, to understand that there really is no moral distinction between Israel. Again, you were very careful, and I thank you for the point that the American people and the American government and the oligarchy that controls the American government, these are two different things. And I've often said, I regard the American people as our brothers and sisters, as I regard all peoples as our brothers and sisters, but the American government is an entirely different matter. And it works in many ways to oppress and exploit the vast majority of Americans. And we must always remember that. But I think it's very important for us to dispense with this notion that there's some kind of a meaningful distinction between the American political elite and economic elite on the one hand, and the Israeli political elite and economic elite on the other. I believe, sure, they have disagreements around the margins, and they may have disputes about tactics, but their agenda is fundamentally the same. Their racism, their barbarism,
Yes.
their sadism is fundamentally the same, and they're seeking to achieve the same objectives. And we should resist any suggestion, for example, like that made by Robert Wood when he said, "Oh, we didn't know anything about this. We had nothing to do with it." As you said, at a bare minimum, you supplied the weapons, dude. I mean, so how can you say you have nothing to do with it?
The weapons and the vetoes and the mainstream media coverage and the designations and the nomenclature all around the world. I
Yes.
mean, today I found the New York Times had Ismail Haniyeh dead at 62. Why did he really fall off the balcony? Dead at 62? Not assassinated, not bombed, not killed. I mean, this is also part of the media, is a big part of the aid that the Americans are giving the Israelis as well.
Absolutely. So thank you so much, Ghadi, for joining me again. I implore you to keep
Thank
safe.
you for having me.
And I hope to continue our conversation as this
I
extraordinary.
think, Dimitri, in the coming days and weeks and the escalations that will happen, I think you're going to be hearing more from me. You're going to be hearing more from Beirut. And I just want to tell all your viewers that we are safe. Don't worry about us. We have been fighting this cruelty for 76 years plus, and we are now in the end of our struggle, inshallah.
Inshallah. Thank you very much. And this is Dimitri Lascaris and Ghadi Francis coming to you on August 1st, 2024.